This is a presentation by Will Mallory and Caroline Birdrow entitled Anatomical Ethics: Why We Should Do More to Address Poverty. Our thesis is, all human beings are connected by the commonality of the human experience and thus are responsible for upholding the value and worth of every human life by addressing poverty-related hardship. Nearly half of all human beings alive today are living in severe poverty. As this suffering is dispersed all across the globe, it might be troublesome to imagine how you, just 1 in 7 billion people, can make a real contribution to the fight against poverty. Despite your vast separation from all those living in severe poverty, it is essential to remember that we as human beings are all connected. The decisions you make on a daily basis, according to Thomas Pogge, reverberate around the globe. And just as every cause has its effect, often each benefit produced in this world is accompanied somewhere by a harm equal to or even greater than that benefit. Although there cannot be any definite consistency between the decisions we make, there should be consistency in the fundamental rights we have as human beings. The troubling truth is that millions of people around the globe do not even have the liberty to exercise even the most basic of human rights. A major reason that poverty-related hardship continues to persist and even cultivates in the world today is because many affluent members of the world abide by the ideals given by Garrett Hardin in his piece entitled Lifeboat Ethics: The Case Against Helping the Poor. The fundamental problem with lifeboat ethics is that it presumes a divide between the well-off and the poor. As the poor swim hopelessly in the sea, begging for a spot in the boat, the well-off paddle away, reaping the benefits of their fortune from being lucky enough to get a spot in the boat in the first place. But living according to the idea that there is a divide between the well-off and poor, and that we are justified in leaving the poor to perish, is exactly what is allowing poverty to persist and cultivate. Hardin argues that the poor countries should be forced to learn the hard way. But if poor countries were forced to figure things out on their own, poverty would certainly grow until poor countries possibly could completely deteriorate. Hardin and his advocates have been corrupted by wealth, and have been blinded to the importance of the commonality of the human experience and the importance of fundamental rights.
Characterizing relationships in terms of distance and in the framework of Hardin's lifeboat ethics leads humans to forget about the true interconnectedness of the human race. It is more accurate to adopt the view of several influential thinkers such as Plato, Auguste Comte, Hertz Spencer, and Emile Durkheim, who conceptualize society as analogous to a living organism. Each thinker applied this metaphor differently, and we have labeled our application as anatomical ethics. Although humans are separated by physical distance and have many differences, they all inhabit the same planet and are part of one metaphorical human body. In Lifeboat Ethics, Hardin asks, should those nations that do manage to put something aside be forced to come to the rescue each time an emergency occurs among the poor nations? Taking anatomical ethics into consideration, the answer most definitely would be yes. Humans cannot fully and happily function without every part of their bodies. More importantly, if a part does stop functioning, the natural human instinct is to resuscitate it. Thus, if some humans are in poverty, the health of our entire body is at stake unless we relieve their hardship. Membership in this collective human body entails certain basic rights. In severe poverty as a human rights violation, Thomas Pogge quotes the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which defines one's basic rights to include a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care. Iris Marion Young claims that marginalization of certain social groups leads to material deprivation and therefore increased dependency. Those who are dependent and receive aid typically are not afforded the same rights, respect, or opportunities to pursue their own interests. Young views dependency as natural and asserts that dependents have a moral right to depend on others for subsistence and support. It is likely that Young would sympathize with anatomical ethics, as she believes that rights should fall into a more collectivistic framework as to better protect those she calls marginals and dependents. As a part of the metaphorical human body, individuals have both rights and duties. All humans recognize that suffering is bad, and as John Rawls would claim, are self-interested beings who do not want to experience hardship. Thus, following anatomical ethics, if suffering is bad for one, it is bad for all, and humans have a positive duty to prevent the suffering of others and to address poverty-related hardship.
Furthermore, in his work entitled The Life You Can Save, Peter Singer defends an argument asserting that if you aren't using your money on something nearly as important as saving human lives by donating to aid agencies, then you are doing something wrong. The implication of this argument is that you should donate everything you have until, quote, the point where if you give any more, you will be sacrificing something nearly as important as a child's life, like giving so much that you can no longer afford to give your children adequate education, end quote. But this leads us to a criticism of Singer. If the sacrifice is not something nearly as important, like a daily cup of coffee, for instance, would its contribution to the fight against poverty really have a significant impact? And shouldn't individuals have the autonomy to spend what they earn however they want? This is where Thomas Pogge also differentiates with Singer. Pogge recognizes the importance of social institutions and asserts that, quote, the rules governing economic transactions are the most important causal determinants of the incidence and depth of poverty, end quote. Pogge argues that while conscious individual spending might be important, it is quite impossible to try to disentangle the impact of our decisions from the vast traffic of all other decisions being made simultaneously. Pogge argues that institutional reform is most important to the fight against poverty.
Thus, every member of the metaphorical body has a different level of responsibility in maintaining its health, as not all have the same resources and power. One's most basic and primary duty is to contribute to his family and engage in the development of communities. With increased resources and power, he is expected to participate in direct volunteer work and to donate to poverty relief efforts. Finally, Pogge claims that, quote, it is widely accepted that a person's human rights impose positive duties on her government and thereby immediately on her fellow citizens who must give political and economic support to the governmental protection of human rights, end quote. To demonstrate the power of institutional decisions, consider this example. Singer might claim that an individual does not need to buy a $5 latte every day of the year and could be donating this money to relieve poverty. This may be true, but the impact of stopping this daily consumption is fairly trivial. Well-developed countries, according to Pogge, annually are donating $11 billion to the relief of global poverty. Our $1,825 coffee budget does not even begin to match that number or the $300 billion Pogge thinks countries should be donating. Institutions, rather, can make a far greater impact.
Robert Nozick provides an argument that focuses on the individual's rights in accordance with money and resources that have been acquired both justly and unjustly. Nozick argues that as long as an individual's holdings have come into his or her possessions justly, then the individual is entitled to do with his or her holdings however he or she wishes. This raises an important theoretical question in deciding how we, as connected individuals, are to approach poverty from a rights standpoint. From this question, we conclude that every individual has a positive moral duty to prevent other individuals from living in poverty. Another important takeaway from Nozick is that he believes in full rectification of past injustices, but also holds that redistribution of resources is a violation of people's rights. To this, we want to support the response that Pogge would give, which would be to say to Nozick that the theory of rectification is essentially the same as redistribution. Being realistic, it is quite impossible to track to which acquisitions and transfers are just and which are unjust. It is evident that our past of injustice has gotten us to the troubling point we are at now. At the end of the day, redistribution of resources is necessary to effectively address poverty-related hardship.
In response to Nozick's question, we might also claim that because humans share one body and a common experience, they also share holdings. Thus, all those in need have a right to holdings justly acquired by any human, and others voluntarily should take on the inherent duty to transfer those holdings to them. We also must consider Rawls' principles of justice, which are that each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive basic liberty compatible with a similar liberty for others, and that social and economic inequalities are to be arranged that they are both reasonably expected to be to everyone's advantage and attached to positions and offices open to all. Rawls' second principle may call for redistribution when inequalities are not to the benefit of all. Some may claim that this violates the first principle of justice, as the right to own property would not be upheld for those who donate to the poor. However, our connection to others suggests that redistribution benefits all and ensures that the liberties of all are protected. If one's advantage is not to the benefit of all, then all will suffer. We have a shared experience and thus shared benefits of redistribution. And thus we are all in this together.